The summer of 2019 was hot in Denver, Colorado. Rachel Thompson was 28 years old and worked at a marketing company downtown. She had given up on dating apps 3 times before, but her best friend Jennifer kept telling her to try again. On a Tuesday evening in July, Rachel sat on her couch with a glass of wine and opened the dating app one more time. That night, she saw David Martinez. His profile picture showed a man with dark hair and a warm smile, standing next to a mountain trail. He was 31 years old and worked as a financial advisor. His other pictures showed him at nice restaurants, driving what looked like an expensive car and dressed in business suits. Rachel liked what she saw and swiped right. Within minutes, David had matched with her and sent a message. "Hi Rachel, I love that picture of you at the art museum. I was just there last weekend. Would you like to grab coffee and talk about our favorite pieces?" Rachel was impressed. Most men on dating apps sent boring messages like, "Hey," or "What's up?" David had actually looked at her pictures and found something interesting to say. They met at a coffee shop called Blend on Saturday morning. Rachel arrived 5 minutes early and saw David already waiting at a corner table. He stood up when he saw her, wearing dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt. He was even better looking in person than in his pictures. He gave her a gentle hug and pulled out her chair. For 2 hours, they talked about everything. David told her about his job helping people plan for retirement and buying homes. He said he had moved to Denver 3 years ago from back east and loved the mountains. Rachel shared stories about her marketing work and her dreams of maybe starting her own business someday. "I have to be honest," David said, stirring his second cup of coffee. "I don't usually stay this long on first dates, but I'm really enjoying talking with you." Rachel felt butterflies in her stomach. She hadn't felt this way about someone in over a year. Their first real date was the following Friday. David picked her up in a black BMW and took her to one of the nicest steakhouses in downtown Denver. Rachel had looked up the menu online and knew the meals cost more than she usually spent on food in a whole week. When she mentioned this, David just smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. I want to take you somewhere special." During dinner, David was the perfect gentleman. He asked the waiter about wine pairings and recommended dishes to Rachel. He listened when she talked and asked follow-up questions. When the check came, he paid without looking at the total. Rachel was impressed by how comfortable he seemed with money. After dinner, they walked around downtown Denver. The summer evening was perfect, with a cool breeze coming down from the mountains. They stopped at a gelato stand and shared a cup of chocolate and vanilla. David put his arm around Rachel as they walked, and she felt like she was in a romantic movie. "I had a really great time tonight," David said when they reached Rachel's apartment building. "Would you like to do this again soon?" Rachel said yes immediately. David kissed her gently on the cheek and waited until she was inside before driving away. Over the next few weeks, David and Rachel saw each other 3 or 4 times a week. He would surprise her with flowers at her office on random days. Her co-workers were jealous and kept asking when they could meet him. David would take her to expensive restaurants, weekend trips to mountain towns, and cultural events around Denver. Rachel's sister Michelle noticed the change in her immediately. "You seem so happy," Michelle said during their weekly phone call. "Tell me more about this David guy." Rachel could talk for hours about how thoughtful David was, how he remembered small details about her life, and how he made her feel special.
"He's different from other guys I've dated," Rachel told Michelle. "He's mature and successful, but he's also really sweet. He listens to me and makes me laugh. I think he might be the one." David had a way of making Rachel feel like the most
important person in the world. When they were together, he put away his phone and focused completely on her. He remembered that she liked tulips instead of roses and that she preferred white wine to red. He knew she was worried about a big presentation at work and would text her encouraging messages before important meetings. In August, David suggested they take a weekend trip to Aspen. He had booked them separate hotel rooms without Rachel even asking, which she thought was respectful. They spent Saturday hiking and looking at art galleries. That evening, they had dinner at a restaurant with a view of the mountains. "I want you to know how much these past few weeks have meant to me," David said over dessert. "I feel like I can be myself with you in a way I haven't felt in a long time." Rachel reached across the table and took his hand. She was falling in love, and she could tell he was too. The weekend in Aspen was perfect. They took pictures together at scenic viewpoints and posted them on social media. Rachel's friends commented about how happy she looked and how handsome David was. Even Rachel's mother, who was usually suspicious of the men Rachel dated, said David seemed like a good match for her. By the end of August, Rachel was spending most of her free time with David. He had a key to her apartment, and she had started leaving clothes at his place. They talked about moving in together after Rachel's lease ended in December. David said he was ready to take the next step in their relationship. Everything seemed perfect. Rachel had found a successful, handsome man who treated her well and shared her values. Her friends were impressed, her family approved, and she felt happier than she had in years. David seemed just as committed to their future together. But there were small things that Rachel chose to ignore. David was vague when she asked specific questions about his family or his past. He said he preferred to focus on the present and their future together. When Rachel suggested meeting his coworkers or seeing his office, David would change the subject or say his job required a lot of privacy. These were tiny red flags in an otherwise perfect relationship. Rachel was so happy that she didn't want to look too closely at the small inconsistencies in David's stories. She trusted him completely and believed they were building something real together. By September 2019, Rachel was certain she had found her soulmate. She started looking at engagement rings online and imagining their wedding. Everything in her life felt like it was falling into place. She had no idea that the man she loved was not who he claimed to be. October in Denver brought cooler weather and changing leaves. Rachel Thompson was still floating on a cloud of happiness from her perfect relationship with David Martinez. They had been together for 3 months, and she was more in love than ever. But small cracks were starting to show in their fairy tale romance. It started with simple questions about the holidays. Rachel wanted to plan ahead and asked David about meeting his family for Thanksgiving or Christmas. She was excited to see where he grew up and meet the people who raised such a wonderful man. But David's reaction was strange. "My family is complicated," David said, looking away from Rachel. They were having dinner at her apartment, and she had brought up holiday plans while they ate pasta. "We don't really do big family gatherings. They're all back east and we're not very close." Rachel tried to be understanding. Not everyone had a close family like hers. But when she asked which state his family lived in, David gave a vague answer. "Oh, the Northeast area. We moved around a lot when I was a kid." When Rachel pressed for more details, David changed the subject to their plans for the weekend. The next red flag came when Rachel suggested visiting David's office. She had been dating him for 3 months but had never seen where he worked. She offered to bring him lunch one day or pick him up after work. David's financial advisor job seemed important and successful, and Rachel was proud of him. She wanted to see his workplace. "I wish you could, but my company has strict rules about visitors," David explained. "We deal with a lot of wealthy clients and their personal financial information. The building has really tight security." It sounded reasonable, but Rachel noticed David seemed nervous when she brought it up. One afternoon, Rachel decided to surprise David by looking up his company online. She wanted to learn more about the firm where her boyfriend worked, but when she searched for the company name David had mentioned, she found very little information. The website looked basic and didn't have much detail about their services or employees. Rachel mentioned this to her best friend Jennifer during their weekly lunch. "Maybe it's a small company," Jennifer suggested. But she looked concerned. "Have you ever seen David's business cards or any paperwork from his job?" Now that Jennifer mentioned it, Rachel realized she hadn't. David talked about his work but never showed her anything official. He said he kept work and personal life separate, which seemed professional, but it was starting to feel odd. The biggest shock came in late October. Rachel had been staying at David's apartment more often, and she loved the modern downtown building and expensive furniture. David had told her he owned the place and was proud of his investment in Denver real estate. One evening, Rachel arrived at David's apartment building and saw him talking to a woman in the lobby. The woman looked official and was holding a tablet and papers. Rachel heard pieces of their conversation as she walked closer. "Your weekly rental period ends tomorrow," the woman was saying. "Do you want to extend for another week, or are you checking out?" Rachel felt confused. Weekly rental? David saw her approaching and quickly ended the conversation with the woman. He took Rachel's hand and led her to the elevator. "What was that about?" Rachel asked as they rode up to the apartment. David looked uncomfortable. "Oh, that was just building management. There's been some confusion about my lease renewal." His explanation didn't make sense, but Rachel didn't want to cause problems by asking too many questions. Later that week, Rachel couldn't stop thinking about what she had heard. She did some research online and discovered that the building David lived in offered short-term furnished rentals for business travelers and people between permanent homes. It wasn't the kind of place someone would buy as a permanent residence. When Rachel confronted David about this, he had an answer ready. "You're right, I haven't been completely honest about the apartment," he admitted. "I'm actually between leases right now. My old lease ended in August and I'm looking for the perfect place to buy. I didn't want you to think less of me for not having a permanent place." David looked so sincere and apologetic that Rachel felt guilty for doubting him. "I was embarrassed," he continued. "I wanted to impress you when we first started dating. I thought if you knew I was staying in temporary housing, you might think I wasn't stable enough for a serious relationship." Rachel melted at his vulnerability. It actually made sense that someone would want to take time finding the right place to buy. And David was right that she might have judged him differently if she'd known he didn't have a permanent address. She forgave him and felt closer to him for sharing something he was embarrassed about, but the financial request started soon after. In early November, David asked Rachel if he could borrow $500. "I have a cash flow issue with one of my client payments," he explained. "It should only be for a few days and I'll pay you back with interest." Rachel had never mixed money with relationships before, but David seemed genuinely stressed about the situation. He showed her text messages that looked like they were from frustrated clients. $500 was a lot of money for Rachel, but she had savings and wanted to help the man she loved. "You don't have to pay me back with interest," Rachel said, writing David a check. "We're partners. Partners help each other." David was so grateful and relieved that Rachel felt good about helping him. He paid her back exactly 1 week later, just as he had promised. Rachel felt proud that she had been able to support him during a difficult time. 2 weeks later, David needed help again. This time, it was $1,200 for what he said were unexpected medical bills. "My insurance company is being difficult about covering some tests my doctor ordered," he explained. "I can pay you back as soon as they process my claim." $1,200 was much more money than Rachel was comfortable lending. It would use up most of her emergency savings. But David seemed really worried about the medical situation, and Rachel couldn't say no to someone she loved who needed help. "Of course I'll help you," Rachel said, even though she felt nervous about the amount. "Your health is more important than money." David was emotional when Rachel gave him the money. He held her close and thanked her over and over. "I'm so lucky to have someone like you in my life," he said. "I promise I'll make this up to you." Rachel's sister Michelle noticed that Rachel seemed more stressed during their phone calls in November. "Is everything okay with you and David?" Michelle asked. "Everything's great," Rachel said quickly. "We're just dealing with some practical stuff as our relationship gets more serious." She didn't tell Michelle about the money she had lent David. It felt private, and she didn't want her family to worry or judge her decisions. Jennifer at work also noticed changes in Rachel. "You seem tired lately," Jennifer observed, "and you've been checking your phone more during meetings." Rachel realized she had been waiting anxiously for David to text her back about when he could repay the medical bill loan. It had been 3 weeks, and every time she brought it up, David said the insurance company was still processing his claim. By December, small doubts were growing in Rachel's mind. David's stories about his family, his work, and his living situation had inconsistencies. The money he had borrowed was taking longer to repay than expected, and sometimes Rachel caught David in small lies about where he had been or who he had been with. But Rachel pushed these concerns away. David was still romantic and attentive. He still took her to nice places and made her feel special. Everyone had complicated situations in their lives. Rachel believed that love meant supporting each other through difficult times. She had no idea that everything she believed about David Martinez was a carefully constructed lie. December 2019 was supposed to be a month of celebration for Rachel Thompson. She and David had been together for 5 months, and she was expecting him to propose soon. She had been dropping hints about rings and looking at wedding venues online. But instead of joy, December brought a phone call that would destroy everything Rachel believed about her perfect relationship. It was a Tuesday evening, and Rachel was at home wrapping Christmas presents. She had spent more money than usual on gifts for David, buying him an expensive watch and planning a surprise weekend trip to Vail. Her phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Hello, is this Rachel Thompson?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded nervous but determined. "Yes, this is Rachel." "Who is this?" Rachel replied, setting down the wrapping paper. "My name is Lisa Parker. I think we need to talk about David Martinez." The woman paused. "I believe you're dating my fiancé." Rachel felt her heart stop. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "David Martinez, about 6 feet tall, dark hair, drives a black BMW. Says he works as a financial advisor." Lisa's voice was shaking. "I've been engaged to him for 8 months. We're supposed to get married in April." "That's impossible," Rachel said immediately. "David isn't engaged. We've been together since July and he's never mentioned anyone. Named Lisa." "I found your number in his phone," Lisa continued, "along with photos of you two together. I know this is hard to believe, but I have proof." Rachel's hands were trembling as she held the phone. This had to be some kind of mistake or cruel joke. David would never lie to her about something this big. They were building a life together. "Can you meet me somewhere?" Lisa asked. "I think we both need to see what's really going on." Against her better judgment, Rachel agreed to meet Lisa at a coffee shop the next evening. She spent the entire day at work distracted and worried. During lunch, she tried calling David, but he didn't answer. He texted back saying he was in meetings all day and would call her later. When Rachel arrived at the coffee shop, she immediately recognized Lisa from the description she had given. Lisa was about Rachel's age, with blonde hair and a tired expression. She was carrying a folder full of papers and photos. "Thank you for coming," Lisa said as they sat down. "I know this must be really confusing for you." Lisa opened the folder and spread photos across the table. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The photos showed Lisa and David together at restaurants, on vacation, and at what looked like family gatherings. In several pictures, David was wearing the same clothes Rachel had seen him wear on their dates. "We've been together for 3 years," Lisa explained. "He proposed to me last March during a trip to Las Vegas. We've been planning our wedding and looking for a house to buy together." Rachel stared at the photos in shock. One picture showed Lisa wearing a diamond engagement ring while David kissed her cheek. The date stamp showed it was taken just 2 weeks before Rachel had first met David on the dating app. "This can't be real," Rachel whispered. "David told me he hasn't been in a serious relationship in over a year." Lisa pulled out her phone and showed Rachel text message conversations with David. The messages were full of love and plans for their future. Some of the texts were sent on the same days David had been with Rachel, telling her he loved her too. "I started getting suspicious about a month ago," Lisa said. "David has been distant and secretive. He's been traveling more for work and spending less time at my apartment. When I looked at his phone while he was in the shower, I found all these messages and photos with you." Rachel felt sick to her stomach. Everything she had believed about her relationship with David was crashing down around her. "How long have you known about me?" she asked. "Just a few days," Lisa admitted. "I've been trying to figure out what to do. Part of me hoped it was just a work friendship or something innocent, but the messages between you two are clearly romantic." The two women spent 2 hours comparing their experiences with David. The similarities were frightening. He had used the same romantic gestures with both of them. He had told similar stories about his childhood and family. He had even taken them to some of the same restaurants and vacation spots. Wait, Rachel said suddenly. What did you say David does for work? He's a financial advisor downtown, Lisa replied. He works for Morrison Financial Group. That's not the company he told me, Rachel said, feeling more confused. He said he worked for Denver Investment Partners. Lisa looked puzzled. I've been to his office several times. It's definitely Morrison Financial Group. I've met some of his coworkers. Rachel realized that David had lied to both of them about different aspects of his life. He was creating separate stories for each relationship to avoid getting caught. The most shocking discovery came when they compared the money they had lent David. Lisa had been giving David money for almost 2 years, starting with small amounts and gradually increasing. Her total losses were over $15,000. He told me he was investing the money in real estate deals, Lisa explained. He said we would make a profit that would help pay for our wedding and honeymoon. Rachel felt dizzy when she calculated how much money she had given David. Between the loans and expensive dates where she had insisted on paying her share, she had spent nearly $8,000 on their relationship. We have to confront him together, Lisa said. If we both show up at the same time, he won't be able to lie his way out of it. Rachel was scared but knew Lisa was right. They needed answers, and David needed to face the truth about what he had done to both of them. They planned to surprise David at the apartment where Rachel thought he lived. Lisa had been to the same apartment building before and knew which unit David stayed in. They decided to go there the next evening when David was expecting to meet Rachel for dinner. When they knocked on the apartment door, a confused elderly man answered. He had never heard of David Martinez and had been living in that apartment for 3 years. Lisa and Rachel realized that David had been lying about where he lived too. They tried calling David, but his phone went straight to voicemail. They tried the different phone numbers they each had for him, but none of them worked anymore. Over the next few days, Rachel and Lisa worked together like detectives, trying to piece together the truth about the man they had both loved. They discovered that the BMW David drove was a rental car, not owned by him. The expensive restaurants where he took them were paid for with credit cards that were probably stolen or fraudulent. Most disturbing of all, they found evidence that David had been active on multiple dating apps under different names and with different photos. He wasn't just maintaining 2 relationships, he was running a complex operation designed to meet and exploit multiple women at the same time. I think his real name isn't even David Martinez, Lisa said during one of their phone calls. Everything about him was fake. Rachel felt like her entire world had collapsed. The man she had fallen in love with, the man she had trusted with her heart and her money, didn't exist. She had been dating a complete stranger who had been lying to her every single day for 5 months. But Rachel and Lisa were determined to find the truth and make sure David faced consequences for what he had done to them. They had no idea that they were about to discover something much bigger and more frightening than they had imagined. January 2020 was the coldest month Rachel Thompson could remember, not just because of the Denver winter, but because of the ice-cold reality that had taken over her life. After discovering David's lies with Lisa Parker, Rachel knew she had to take action. The 2 women had decided to report David to the police together. On a snowy Tuesday morning, Rachel and Lisa walked into the Denver Police Department. The lobby was busy with people filing reports and waiting to speak with officers. Rachel's hands were shaking as she approached the front desk. "We need to report a fraud case," Rachel told the officer at the desk. "A man has been stealing money from us by pretending to be someone he's not." The desk officer listened to their basic story and assigned them to Detective Maria Santos. Detective Santos was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and kind eyes. She specialized in financial crimes and had been with the police department for 15 years. "Tell me everything from the beginning," Detective Santos said as they sat in her small office. Rachel and Lisa took turns explaining how they had met David, how their relationships had developed, and how they had discovered the truth about his lies. Detective Santos took careful notes and asked detailed questions. "Do you have any photos of this man? Any documentation of the money you gave him? Text messages or emails?" Rachel and Lisa had come prepared. They showed Detective Santos hundreds of photos from their phones, bank records showing the money transfers, and screenshots of text messages. They also brought copies of the fake business cards David had given them and information about the different companies he claimed to work for. "This is more complex than a simple dating scam," Detective Santos said after reviewing their evidence. "This man was running a sophisticated operation. The level of planning and deception suggests he's done this before." Detective Santos began her investigation immediately. Her first step was to verify whether David Martinez was even a real person. She ran background checks using the personal information Rachel and Lisa had been given, but found no records matching David's supposed identity. "The social security number he gave you belongs to someone who died in 1987, Detective Santos told them during their second meeting. "The address he listed as his childhood home doesn't exist. David Martinez appears to be completely fictional." Next, Detective Santos investigated the companies David claimed to work for. Denver Investment Partners, the firm he had told Rachel about, was a real company, but they had no employee named David Martinez. Morrison Financial Group, where Lisa thought David worked, had never heard of him either. He was using real company names to make his stories believable, Detective Santos explained. But he never actually worked at any of these places. The detective's investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Using facial recognition software and the photos Rachel and Lisa had provided, Detective Santos discovered that the man they knew as David Martinez was actually named Daniel Webb. He was 33 years old and originally from Texas. Daniel Webb had a criminal history that made Rachel's blood run cold. He had been arrested twice in Texas for stalking and harassment of ex-girlfriends. He had also been investigated for identity theft and credit card fraud in Arizona, though charges were never filed. "This man is a professional criminal," Detective Santos told Rachel and Lisa during their third meeting. "Romance fraud appears to be his main source of income." Detective Santos contacted police departments in other states where Daniel Webb had lived. What she discovered was shocking. Webb had been using the same methods to target women across the western United States for at least 4 years. In Arizona, police had reports from 3 different women who had been victimized by Webb under different fake names. In Nevada, 2 more women had reported similar experiences. Each time, Webb would create a new identity, find women through dating apps, and gradually extract money from them before disappearing. "We've identified at least 12 victims so far," Detective Santos told Rachel and Lisa. "But we think there are probably more who never reported what happened to them." The total amount of money Webb had stolen was staggering. Across all the known victims, he had taken more than $150,000. Some women had lost their entire life savings. Others had maxed out credit cards or borrowed money from family members to give to Webb. Detective Santos showed Rachel and Lisa photos from Webb's other victims. The women all looked similar. They were professional, successful, and in their late 20s or early 30s. Webb seemed to target a specific type of woman who was likely to have disposable income and a desire for a serious relationship. He studied his victims carefully, Detective Santos explained. He would spend weeks researching their social media profiles before making contact. By the time he asked them on a date, he knew exactly what kind of person they were looking for. The investigation revealed the sophisticated tools Webb used to maintain his fake identities. He had multiple cell phones, each registered under different names. He used fake driver's licenses and social security numbers to rent apartments and cars. He even had fake business websites created to support his cover stories. Detective Santos found notebooks in a storage unit Webb had rented under one of his false names. The notebooks contained detailed profiles of dozens of women, including personal information, financial details, and psychological notes about their personalities and vulnerabilities. He rated each woman based on how much money he thought he could get from her, Detective Santos said, showing Rachel one of the notebook pages. He kept track of their emotional weaknesses and used that information to manipulate them. Rachel felt sick reading Webb's notes about her. He had written that she was trusting and eager to please, and good for at least $10,000 if handled carefully. He had planned their entire relationship as a business transaction. The investigation also revealed that Webb had been taking photos and videos of his victims without their knowledge. Some of these images were intimate photos taken in their homes or hotel rooms. Detective Santos suspected Webb might have been using these photos for blackmail or selling them online. "We need to find this man as quickly as possible," Detective Santos said. "He's not just stealing money, he's a predator who enjoys hurting people." But finding Daniel Webb would prove to be more difficult than anyone expected. He had years of experience disappearing when his schemes were discovered. By the time police began looking for him, Webb had already vanished from Colorado and was likely starting new relationships with new victims somewhere else. Detective Santos put out alerts to police departments across the country and contacted the FBI about Webb's interstate crimes. She also worked with banks and credit card companies to flag the fake accounts Webb had been using. "We're going to catch him," Detective Santos promised Rachel and Lisa. "Men like this always make mistakes eventually. When he does, we'll be ready." Rachel left the police station feeling both hopeful and terrified. She was glad the investigation was underway. But knowing the full extent of Webb's crimes made her realize how lucky she was to have discovered the truth when she did. Other women had suffered much worse fates at Webb's hands. March 2020 brought both hope and frustration for Rachel Thompson and Lisa Parker. Detective Maria Santos had been working their case for 2 months, but Daniel Webb seemed to have disappeared completely. The investigation had expanded across multiple states, but Webb was always one step ahead of the police. Detective Santos had discovered that Webb was much more clever than typical criminals. He never stayed in one place for more than a few months. He used cash for most transactions, to avoid leaving a paper trail. He changed his appearance regularly and had learned how to avoid security cameras in public places. "This man has been doing this for years," Detective Santos explained to Rachel during one of their regular updates. "He knows exactly how police investigations work, and he's developed methods to stay hidden." Webb's pattern was becoming clear. Through the investigation, he would arrive in a new city and immediately start creating fake identities. He would rent short-term apartments using stolen credit cards or fake IDs. Then he would begin hunting for victims on dating apps, usually targeting 3 or 4 women at the same time. The FBI had joined the investigation because Webb's crimes crossed state lines. Agent Jennifer Clark was assigned to lead the federal case. Agent Clark had 15 years of experience tracking con artists and identity thieves. "Webb is what we call a sophisticated predator," Agent Clark told Rachel and Lisa during their first meeting. "He doesn't just steal money. He studies human psychology and uses people's emotions against them." The investigation revealed that Webb had been using the same basic techniques for years, but he constantly improved his methods. In his early crimes in Texas, he had made simple mistakes like using his real phone number or meeting victims near his actual home. By the time he reached Colorado, he had perfected his system. Agent Clark showed Rachel and Lisa a timeline of Webb's known crimes. He had started in Texas in 2016 with simple dating scams. By 2017, he was using multiple fake identities in Arizona. In 2018 and 2019, he had expanded his operations to Nevada and Colorado, running increasingly complex schemes. Each time he moves to a new state, he gets better at avoiding detection, Agent Clark explained. He learns from his mistakes and develops new ways to manipulate his victims. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. In April 2020, Webb made a crucial error in Las Vegas, Nevada. He had been dating a woman named Amanda Wilson for 6 weeks under the name Michael Torres. Amanda worked as a casino security manager and was more suspicious than Webb's usual victims. When Webb asked Amanda for a loan of $3,000, she decided to investigate his background. Using her connections in casino security, Amanda ran Webb's photo through facial recognition databases. She discovered that the man she knew as Michael Torres was actually Daniel Webb, and he was wanted by police in multiple states. Instead of confronting Webb directly, Amanda called the FBI tip line. Agent Clark coordinated with Las Vegas police to set up surveillance on Webb without alerting him that his cover was blown. For 2 weeks, police watched Webb while he continued his normal routine in Las Vegas. They discovered he was living in a furnished apartment under the name Michael Torres and was dating at least 2 other women besides Amanda. He was also actively searching for new victims on dating apps. Police finally arrested Webb on April 15, 2020, when he tried to use a stolen credit card at an expensive restaurant. The credit card had been reported stolen 2 days earlier by a tourist visiting Las Vegas. When Webb couldn't provide proper identification for the card, restaurant security called police. During his arrest, Webb was carrying fake driver's licenses for 3 different identities. In his apartment, police found a sophisticated operation that shocked even experienced investigators. Webb's apartment contained multiple cell phones, each programmed with different dating app profiles. He had detailed files on more than 40 women across 6 states, including photos, personal information, and notes about their financial situations. He also had equipment for creating fake identification documents. Detective Santos flew to Las Vegas to interview Webb after his arrest. She was eager to finally face the man who had caused so much pain to Rachel, Lisa, and so many other women, Daniel. Webb was completely calm during the interview, Detective Santos later told Rachel. He showed no remorse for what he had done. He talked about his crimes like they were a business. During the interview, Webb admitted to using fake identities to meet women, but he claimed his victims were willing participants who knew the risks. He insisted that he had never forced anyone to give him money and that everything was consensual. He tried to make it sound like the women were partially responsible for being deceived, Detective Santos said. He showed no understanding of the emotional damage he had caused. Webb refused to provide information about other victims or admit to the full extent of his crimes. He only acknowledged the cases where police had concrete evidence against him. The search of Webb's apartment revealed the true scope of his criminal operation. Police found notebooks dating back 4 years with details about hundreds of women. Many of these women had never reported being victimized, either because they were embarrassed or because they hadn't realized they were dealing with a criminal. Agent Clark began the difficult process of contacting all the women mentioned in Webb's files. Some had been minor victims who lost small amounts of money. Others had been completely destroyed financially and emotionally by their relationships with Webb. The psychological damage was often worse than the financial losses, Agent Clark explained. These women had their ability to trust other people completely shattered. Rachel and Lisa felt a mixture of relief and anger when they learned about Webb's arrest. They were glad he couldn't hurt anyone else, but they were frustrated by his lack of remorse. I wanted him to explain why he did this to us, Rachel said. I wanted him to apologize and show some understanding of the pain he caused, but he acted like we were the ones who had done something wrong. The investigation also revealed that Webb had been planning to expand his operations. Police found evidence that he was researching international dating sites and considering moving. His schemes overseas where it would be harder for American law enforcement to track him. We caught him just in time, Agent Clark said. A few more months and he might have disappeared to another country where we couldn't have prosecuted him. With Webb finally in custody, the legal process could begin. Prosecutors in multiple states were preparing charges against him, and his victims would finally have a chance to see justice served. But the hunt for Daniel Webb had revealed a disturbing truth about how easy it was for predators to exploit people's desire for love and connection. Rachel knew that Webb's arrest was just the beginning of a long legal battle. She was determined to see him face full consequences for his crimes, not just for herself but for all the women whose lives he had damaged. May 2020 marked a turning point for Rachel Thompson. After months of investigation and uncertainty, Daniel Webb was finally being brought back to Colorado to face charges for his crimes. Rachel felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as the legal process began. Webb was extradited from Nevada to Denver on May 3, 2020. He arrived at the courthouse in handcuffs, wearing an orange jail uniform. Rachel attended the hearing with Lisa Parker and Detective Maria Santos. Seeing Webb in person for the first time since discovering his lies was emotional and difficult. The man Rachel had loved looked smaller and less impressive than she remembered. Without his expensive clothes and confident smile, Webb appeared ordinary and unremarkable. Rachel realized that his charm and good looks had been just another part of his carefully constructed disguise. District Attorney Robert Johnson was handling Webb's prosecution. Johnson had 20 years of experience with fraud cases and understood the complex nature of romance scams. He explained to Rachel and Lisa that building a strong case would require detailed documentation of Webb's crimes. We need to prove not just that he lied to you, but that he did so with the specific intent to steal money. District Attorney Johnson explained. Romance fraud cases can be challenging because victims often gave money willingly, even if they were deceived about who they were giving it to. The prosecution team spent weeks preparing their case. They gathered bank records, text messages, photos, and witness statements from Webb's victims across multiple states. They also worked with computer experts to analyze Webb's fake dating profiles and forged documents. Rachel and Lisa had to provide detailed testimony about their relationships with Webb. This process was emotionally difficult because they had to relive all the lies and manipulation they had experienced. Rachel felt embarrassed having to explain how she had been deceived, but District Attorney Johnson assured her that she had nothing to be ashamed of. "You were the victim of a crime," Johnson told Rachel. "Daniel Webb is a professional criminal who spent years perfecting his techniques. The fact that he was able to deceive you doesn't reflect poorly on your intelligence or judgment." Webb's defense attorney, Michael Peterson, tried to argue that his client suffered from psychological problems that made him unable to understand the wrongness of his actions. Peterson claimed that Webb had a personality disorder that compelled him to lie and manipulate others. "My client needs treatment, not punishment," Peterson argued during pretrial hearings. "He's a sick man who doesn't fully understand the impact of his behavior on others." District Attorney Johnson strongly disagreed with this defense strategy. He presented evidence showing that Webb's crimes were carefully planned and executed over many years. The detailed notebooks Webb kept about his victims proved that he understood exactly what he was doing. This was not the behavior of someone with impaired judgment, Johnson argued. This was the calculated criminal enterprise of a man who chose to prey on innocent people for financial gain. As the trial date approached, more of Webb's victims came forward. The prosecution identified 17 women across 6 states who had been defrauded by Webb's various schemes. The total amount stolen was over $200,000. Some victims had lost their entire life savings. Others had been forced to borrow money from family members or max out credit cards to pay Webb's fake emergencies. Several women had suffered severe depression and anxiety after discovering they had been deceived. The trial began in August 2020. Rachel attended every day, sitting in the front row with other victims. She wanted Webb to see the faces of the people he had hurt and to understand the real consequences of his actions. During the trial, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of Webb's guilt. They showed the jury his collection of fake identification documents, his detailed victim profiles, and financial records proving he had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. Webb's defense attorney continued to argue that his client was mentally ill and not fully responsible for his actions, but this argument was weakened when prosecutors revealed that Webb had been researching international banking laws and offshore accounts, suggesting he was planning to hide his stolen money overseas. The most powerful moment of the trial came when victims testified about the impact Webb's crimes had on their lives. Rachel took the stand on the third day and spoke directly to the jury about her experience. "Daniel Webb didn't just steal my money," Rachel said, looking directly at Webb as she spoke. "He stole my ability to trust other people. He made me question my own judgment and feel foolish for believing in love. The financial loss was difficult, but the emotional damage has been much worse." Other victims shared similar stories. Lisa Parker testified about losing her life savings and having to move back in with her parents at age 30. Amanda Wilson, the Las Vegas casino worker who had helped catch Webb, described feeling violated and used when she discovered his deception. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching their verdict. Webb was found guilty on all charges, including identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering, and theft by deception. The judge scheduled sentencing for September 2020. At the sentencing hearing, Webb finally spoke publicly about his crimes, but instead of showing remorse, he continued to blame his victims for being naive and trusting. "These women wanted to believe in a fantasy," Webb told the judge. "I gave them what they wanted to hear. If they chose to give me money based on that, that was their decision." Judge Sarah Martinez was clearly angered by Webb's continued lack of remorse. "Mr. Webb, you have shown no understanding of the devastating impact your crimes have had on innocent people," she said. You are a predator who deliberately targeted vulnerable women and destroyed their lives for your own selfish gain. Judge Martinez sentenced Webb to 12 years in federal prison, with restitution ordered to all identified victims. Webb would also be required to register as a sex offender due to the stalking components of his crimes. This sentence reflects the serious nature of your crimes and your complete lack of remorse, Judge Martinez said. I hope that during your time in prison, you will reflect on the harm you have caused and find some measure of human decency. Rachel felt a sense of closure when Webb was led away in handcuffs. The legal process had been long and difficult, but seeing him face consequences for his actions was important for her healing process. The aftermath of Webb's case led to changes in how law enforcement handles romance fraud. Detective Santos worked with dating app companies to improve their identity verification processes. She also developed training materials to help other police departments recognize and investigate similar crimes. Rachel decided to use her experience to help other victims of romance fraud. She began speaking at conferences and working with victim advocacy groups. She also started a blog where she shared her story and provided resources for people who had been deceived by online predators. I don't want other women to go through what I went through, Rachel explained. If sharing my story can help even one person avoid being victimized, then something positive will have come from this terrible experience. Lisa Parker also became an advocate for fraud victims. She changed careers and became a financial counselor, specializing in helping people recover from financial crimes. She found that using her own experience with fraud helped her connect with clients who had been through similar situations. 2 years after Webb's conviction, Rachel was finally ready to start dating again. The process was slow and difficult because she had to rebuild her ability to trust new people. But she was determined not to let Webb's crimes prevent her from finding real love. I learned that not everyone who seems perfect actually is perfect, Rachel reflected. But I also learned that there are genuinely good people in the world who deserve to be trusted. The key is learning to tell the difference. Daniel Webb remains in federal prison, with his earliest possible release date in 2029. Prison records show he has had disciplinary problems and has shown no signs of rehabilitation or remorse for his crimes. Rachel's story serves as a warning about the dangers of online dating and the sophisticated methods used by modern con artists. But it's also a story of resilience and recovery, showing that victims of fraud can rebuild their lives and find ways to help others avoid similar harm. The case highlighted how romance fraud has become a major criminal enterprise, with thousands of people losing billions of dollars each year to predators who exploit people's desire for love and connection. Rachel's courage in pursuing justice helped protect countless other potential victims from falling prey to Daniel Webb's schemes.